one of the best guards in the Big Ten, officially announced his return to the Nittany Lions. And because of that, Penn State will make the NCAA tournament this upcoming season.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh yeah, Penn State men's basketball is much improved for the 2024-25 season, especially with Ace Baldwin confirming he is coming back. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Sako. And thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Help me welcome him back. He is now a free agent in the sports media world. That is Adam Sheetz, now Penn State University graduate, but formerly a member of CommRadio, was the Penn State men's basketball insider for the organization. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So if you are in need of a sports media broadcasting guru, Adam Sheetz is the guy to hire. So we're talking about Penn State men's basketball. Penn State baseball gets robbed, but with the Ace Baldwin news and Penn State already being projected as a top 25 team in the initial rankings to start the upcoming season when it rolls around in the winter, Penn State's an NCAA tournament team this time around. You bring back Ace Baldwin, right? The face of this team, the face of this program, who complements Mike Rhodes' system so well after a possibility of going into the portal, going into the NBA draft. You're able to retain Puff Johnson, and then you get so many complementary parts. Adam, when we discussed this at this time a year ago, I wasn't afraid to say that, hey, this team can be really good. The only thing that's going to hold them back is chemistry. Well, that's exactly what happened. They had the talent. They didn't have the chemistry until it was too late. But this time around, they do have the chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really exciting. I think you have a good nucleus coming back. You obviously have Ace Baldwin with the big commitment, Nick Kern, Zach Hicks, Puff Johnson, and DeMarco Dunn all returning to Penn State. They got a great freshman class, one of the best recruiting classes, and Mike Rhodes has done a great job hitting the portal, getting guys from different backgrounds. You got a big 7-footer from Northern Illinois. He brings in a guy from Nebraska and Eli Rice, as well as bringing in a guy from Tennessee. And I mean, Tennessee, obviously a great basketball program. They don't just take anybody. So to bring a guy, even though a lot of the guys they brought in don't have a lot of playing experience, there are a lot of raw talent, a lot of guys with high upside. And I think that's what you want with a veteran core coming back. Bring guys in that can really fill roles. I think Mike Rhodes did a great job filling that on this team and should make it easy plug and play. You mentioned chemistry was an issue last year on how the guys will play together. Yeah. You have a core nucleus that played together, and now you're bringing in guys that fit needs for this team, should be able to plug and immediately play and fit in the system Mike Rhodes wants to play. So I think it makes it very exciting. They're a team with NCAA tournament potential. Obviously, Big Ten is going to be very tough. You're bringing in the 4 teams from the Pac-12 coming in this year, especially Oregon's the big one. USC's got better with Eric Musselman as their new head coach, as well as UCLA's obviously a great basketball program. But Penn State's on the right track, entering the new look Big Ten to have a chance to be really, really good in Mike Rhodes' second year.
I mean, hypothetically, it's not going to happen. We'll see how they craft the starting 5, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day what that starting 5 is. It's the 5 that you finish with on the floor. But when you have all seniors as your core 5, right? Ace Baldwin, Nick Kern Jr., Zach Hicks, Puff Johnson, DeMarco Dunn. I mean, that is a great base. And you saw the progression they made. I know there was the controversy with Kanye Clary, being removed from the team, right? And, that's your leading scorer. But at the end of the day, Penn State played better without him. And part of those, you already alluded to some of the transfers that they had. Addition by subtraction here. And with the additions that you made, Penn State made an upgrade with every single player. And that's not to try to disrespect. I like Demetrius Lilly a lot. I like Jameel Brown a lot. I thought those players would have been good compliments, but I think at the end of the day, they wanted something different. Penn State also wanted something different. So when you compare these players that are now at Penn State versus the ones that were formerly at Penn State, every single addition that was made was an upgrade compared to the ones that you subtracted from last year's roster in terms of production, former recruiting rankings, any metric that you have to analyze these players. The ones that are currently at Penn State are better than the ones that the Nittany Lions lost.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is these guys fit Mike Rhodes' system a lot better than the guys who left. Jameel Brown was kind of, he's a really good shooter, but that's not something Mike Rhodes heavily focuses on. He's more of a length and defense guy. That's not really who Jameel Brown was, so he decided to move on to Temple.
Right.
Demetrius Lilly, I just think just was never able to stay healthy, so I don't think we ever really got to see a full look of Demetrius Lilly in a Penn State uniform and how good he could potentially be. But you had a guy like Conan Niederhauser, who's a 7-footer, something Penn State has not had in a long time, great size, which is huge in the Big Ten. We've all seen how important big guys are in this conference. And I really like Eli Rice. I think he's got high upside coming over from Nebraska. He's a good shooter, a really good athlete. And I think he's going to add a lot to this team as well. Obviously, losing Kanye Clary, it's not a huge loss because they were playing without him since the middle of February. So you kind of know what Penn State looks like without Kanye Clary on the team. So everyone he brought in fits needs as well as the recruiting class. Miles Goodman's one of the best recruits Penn State's had. He's a big guy, fits a need, and adds depth at the center rotation for Penn State. So I think you look at everyone that's come in, everybody fits a need, and everyone should be able to compete and contribute to this team immediately, which is, I think, something Mike Rhodes and this coaching staff are very excited going into this season.
Mike Rhodes clearly has a vision here. I like the way that he's continued to structure these rosters, because when you look at last year, and it was, I can't call it a dumpster fire, but you had to make so many changes on the fly. It was very tough to do. And Mike Rhodes was the right coach to do that because he was able to fill a lot of gaps in the roster. But it's the progression that there's no class left behind, if you will, Adam. That there's a strong group of seniors. There's a strong group of, not in this case, juniors, but then behind them, a strong group of sophomores, a strong group of freshmen. And that's the point, that there's never going to be a lull. You can use the transfer portal to complement everything, but Mike Rhodes has a blueprint where, all right, we're not going to leave the juniors empty-handed when the seniors move on. We saw that with last year's group. And then, yes, you had those transfers move out. Jameel Brown, Kanye Clary, Demetrius Lilly, right? All those guys were left in Micah Shrewsbury's original freshman class, okay? So that's tough to fill, but you can go do that in the transfer portal. But if you look at this roster, strong group of seniors, Niederhauser's the only junior. That's fine. You can fill that with the transfer portal. But then you have a strong group of sophomores behind him. You have a really good freshman class. Like you said, Miles Goodman is one of the best recruits in Penn State men's basketball history. And he has all the potential in the world. I think he just has to get used to the Big Ten physicality. But another part of this too, Adam, is the fact that Penn State men's basketball can play any type of team. They are not matchup dependent, okay? A lot of times, and that was something that they were somewhat good at, but at the end of the day, the chemistry didn't all blend together last season. But you can play an Oregon, a Michigan, an Ohio State, all these different schools that are coming together now with the Pac-12 teams coming to the Big Ten. You are going to have to play so many different styles of basketball, and Penn State's never going to be overmatched because they don't have a specialty per se that they're lacking.
Yeah, I think that's the huge thing. They're very versatile at every position, which makes them very dangerous. And you look at the one thing, I think last year, if you slowed the game down against Penn State, especially when they lost Kanye Clary, it was kind of hard for them to score in the half court. They wanted to run up and down. They full court pressed you defensively. They wanted to force turnovers. I think this year, I think they can play more of a half court defense, keep games a little lower scoring if they need to in certain games, if maybe the offense isn't clicking on all cylinders. They have opportunities to play different ways, which I think makes Mike Rhodes' job a lot more fun for him and his coaching staff. They can design game plans against other teams to fit those games instead of saying we have to play this way and just hope it matches up tonight against the team we're playing. And I think that's going to be really exciting to watch. And plus, you have all these guys in the second year in the Big Ten. Ace Baldwin Jr., we mentioned how great he was in the A-10, Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten. Him in a second year learning how to play against that competition, the speed of the Big Ten game versus maybe the speed of the Atlantic 10 game and everything you see. He's going to be a much better point guard. Nick Kern Jr. did not play a lot at VCU. He played a lot last year for Penn State. Yeah. He's going to continue to get better. Puff Johnson got hurt early in the year, never really got into it until towards the end of the year. You saw him play really well against Minnesota. He's going to be a lot better. DeMarco Dunn didn't play a lot in his college career until he came to Penn State, so you expect him to take another huge step for the Nittany Lions. So everyone coming back should get a lot better for Penn State, and then all the guys coming in, as we continue to mention, fit roles and fit needs that this team can play a lot of different ways that can be very dangerous, and it's great for Mike Rhodes. It's very frustrating for every coach in the Big Ten now because you never know what Penn State team's going to come in and what to expect.
This is a top 25 team. This is an NCAA tournament team. Everybody stays healthy, but right now they have the nucleus to do just that with the complementary parts that they got out of the transfer portal. Now, Ace Baldwin, the face of this team, does return. That was a big deal if he was going to end up going off to the NBA or potentially another school. We're going to discuss what led into that decision to return. coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. It is winner take all in the NBA and the NHL because it's playoff time, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, that's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more with any winning $5 bet. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. If you are interested in betting on any of the lines in the NBA and NHL playoffs, the Mavericks are a -2-point favorite against the Timberwolves. Can they close out the series in 4 games? Or do you like the Panthers to even things up against the Rangers and make that a 2-2 series? Those lines are available right now on FanDuel. All you got to do again is go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Ace Baldwin officially announced his return. Penn State men's basketball obviously should be very excited about that because, Adam, like you said in the previous segment, that he is, A10 player of the year, defensive player of the year, then comes to the Big Ten, and there isn't a drop off in his defense. The Ace Baldwin is the kind of player that you want at Penn State. He's easy to root for, he's easy to like, and everybody can rally around him. I mean, gosh, he was playing 40 minutes a night every single night. Now he's not going to have to do that, hopefully, down the stretch of the season. Losing a player like Kanye Clary, yes, I know we've criticized him a good bit on the show, but he at the very minimum provided depth and allowed Penn State to rest Ace Baldwin where appropriate. And that ultimately is what led to their demise. They just did not have the depth between Clary off the team and Lilly. But the bigger question, or at least the conversation point here, is that Ace Baldwin, why did he come back? Because he was entertaining the NBA. There were the rumors that he was at least being recruited away from Penn State. I was hearing that, hey, with NIL and the transfer portal, Ace Baldwin could be a hot commodity because of how quickly he adjusted, because you mentioned that, how quickly he adjusted from A10 to Big Ten play. So who's to say that another school wouldn't want a point guard like that? And with NIL, when you can just go and say, hey, we have a vacancy for you. We have an opening to start at a starting job, and we could pay you more NIL. What's appealing about that? Now, Ace Baldwin never actually entered the transfer portal, but it was a strong possibility just because of where college athletics was 2 weeks ago and how different it's going to be moving forward, that you can actually pay college players. But that's a different conversation, Adam. But my point is that NIL and the transfer portal could have led Ace Baldwin to go somewhere else at the collegiate level.
Yeah, I mean, everybody would have wanted him if he entered the portal. I mean, he's Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. He's a guy who can run the point. He's not just a one-trick horse. He's got a lot of things he can do. He can pass, he can score, he can shoot from outside. He's a guy who you can plug in and be a starting point guard on a team that can play in the NCAA tournament. So I think, a lot of teams would have wanted him, and I'm sure a lot of teams, even though they're not allowed to say that they came out and they were talking to him, I'm sure he was hearing a lot of things from a lot of people about where he could have ended up, but he decided to stay at Penn State. So first, you got to give credit to Happy Valley United and their ability to stay locked in on the NIL department to be able to keep him around, because obviously you're going to have to pay your players, and he's a guy who's going to be very sought after, as we mentioned, as well as something that we all knew going into last season, and nothing's changed. His relationship with Mike Rhodes is one of the strongest relationships I've seen between a player and a coach dating back to their time at VCU. Ace talks so highly of Mike Rhodes, and I think that was a big thing. He didn't really want to play for any other college coach. I don't think his game really translated at this moment to the NBA. He's a little undersized for the NBA game. But, so coming back for his last year of college eligibility, he wanted to play for Mike Rhodes, and obviously playing at Penn State. Now the team they built around him, I think Mike Rhodes did a great job of recruiting by adding pieces to be able to look at Ace Baldwin and say, hey, this team can compete and play in the NCAA tournament, because that's Ace Baldwin's goal, is to compete and play in the NCAA tournament, compete for conference championships. I think he believes this Penn State team has the ability to do that, and I think that's what makes it so exciting. Don't know why he waited all the way till the end of May. The transfer portal transfer closed about a month ago, so he really was out of options outside of maybe just retiring from college basketball. But I mean, he waited, and they obviously made his decision to come back to Penn State, which is huge. So credit to Penn State staff for building the roster around him, continuing that relationship with Ace Baldwin, and obviously the NIL collective coming around and making sure he's compensated appreciatively to keep him in State College.
I think there's also the allure of maybe international basketball too, because we said that because the deadline to go into the NBA draft had passed too as well. And as you mentioned, I think he can at least entertain the NBA in the future. I think coming back to college was it was a more than correct decision for Ace Baldwin, because undersized money, again, if you're going to be making good money in college with NIL, that's going to be better than where I would have projected Ace Baldwin as a G League player in his first year. And correct me, Adam, here. They are making what, until their contract is purchased by an NBA team? I think the G League's paying about $30,000 to $50,000 for a player.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're on a two-way contract, you are not making a lot of money playing in the G League.
So there we go. So I imagine that Ace Baldwin is making a significant more amount of money if he's going to return. And we've seen how many players come back to college when they could have gone off to the NBA, because NIL and the college funds there have been more lucrative than what you can do at the NBA level if you were not a bona fide star and get drafted early in the first round. I mean, we've seen prospects pass up on, hey, you'll be selected, but you're probably better off returning for another season and boosting your draft stock any which way you can, while at the same time being successful and then earning some NIL dollars on the side.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it at Penn State in recent years. I mean, obviously different regime, different coaching staff, but Seth Lundy had the option to leave and go to the NBA. He decided to come back for another year and obviously build up his resume as a shooter, and then got drafted in the second round. Jalen Pickett, same way, came in, was 1 year here, had the option to leave. He decided to come back for his COVID year and obviously worked out. He was a high second round pick and was a rotation piece during the regular season for the Denver Nuggets on a two-way contract as well. So we've seen, especially at Penn State, guys come back and benefit from that. Lamar Stevens is another one who stayed at Penn State all 4 years and then has benefited being a good rotation piece in the NBA for his entire career so far in the NBA. So I think we've seen it a lot, especially with Penn State guys, and I think Ace Baldwin made the right decision coming back, being able to capitalize off the NIL and the new college sports world, making his money in college, as well as, again, showing other teams. There was probably questions about him in the A-10. That game really does that translate to the NBA. Playing in the Big Ten, he proved he could be a great defender. Now I'm sure if NBA scouts would tell him, we want to see if maybe you could score more, maybe continue to develop, have another great year, then maybe we take a chance on you and give you an opportunity in the Summer League or the G League on a two-way contract. So I think this year's a huge year for Ace Baldwin, and I think he made absolutely the right decision coming back and having another chance to capitalize, because I think he's going to have a really good year in his second year at Penn State.
I imagine people want to know what that potential starting lineup would look like, because I mentioned that, hey, you have 5 seniors one way or another, whether they're seniors or super seniors, you have 5 veteran players and the additions that you have through the transfer portal. Because when I name those 5 seniors, the only player that, and you could rotate them in, we saw DeMarco Dunn get some starting time, especially when Kanye Clary moved on. But I imagine that it's going to be Ace Baldwin running your point, Nick Kern Jr. being your 2, Zach Hicks being your 3, Puff Johnson being your 4. And then really the question is, can Miles Goodman be the starting 5 right out of the gate? Or is it going to be Code Niederhauser? I think it's going to be Niederhauser because he has that college experience. I imagine Miles Goodman is going to need some time to get adjusted to the size, the strength, the speed of college play, and will log some minutes early on. But we kind of saw that same thing with Keba Jai when he was at Penn State, playing selective minutes, and then down the stretch later in the season with Micah Shrewsbury. And I know 2 different teams, 2 different coaches, but similar trajectory, if you will, because high upside 4-star center, but just needs to get adjusted to Big Ten play, especially with those Pac-12 schools coming over.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Niederhauser is going to be the guy day one, and I think it's huge because Penn State, when Keba Jai was here, they didn't really have the option. It had to be Keba Jai playing the 5. They didn't have an alternative option because they weren't going to start Miles Dredd and start a small guy at center, so they had to start Keba Jai. It's nice Mike Rhodes has this option to start Conan Niederhauser, allow him to kind of take things early. He's a 7-footer, has great size, and I think his game translate over from Northern Illinois into the Big Ten pretty well with what Penn State's going to ask him to do, and allow Goodman, to work in the weight room, room, kind of adjust to the speed of the game a little bit, and then really take off. Maybe not take the spot this year, but be a great rotation piece at the center position. Maybe end up playing more minutes, even if he's still coming off the bench towards the end of the year for Penn State. So I think, that's your starting five. I think you hit it. Zach Hicks is the only guy who started every game for Penn State last year. So you got to think he's going to start. Ace Baldwin Jr. is obviously going to start. And I think Nick Kern, with what he did at the end of the year, solidified his spot. Interested to see Puff Johnson with a full offseason able to stay healthy if they roll with him and go Zach Hicks and him both at that 3-4 position, put Nick Kern at the 2, or maybe put DeMarco Dunn in there and bring maybe Puff Johnson as the 6th man off the bench as a spark plug guy, or maybe him or Nick Kern taking that spark plug role off the bench. But as we mentioned earlier, it's not about who really starts the game, it's who finishes the game. And I think those 5 seniors are going to have their hands all over the ball towards the end of games with chances to really take over.
So I'm very excited for basketball season when it does roll around. This is a very well put together team, and Mike Rhodes is the reason for that, especially what he was able to do on the fly in his first season. Now with a full slate, look what he's able to do in that second off season. Penn State baseball, look what Mike Gambino has done in 1 year's time. Pat Kraft revitalizing this baseball program with a great hire and initiatives to make baseball fun in Happy Valley. But the season was taken away from them. It was robbed from the Diamond Lions. Adam and I are going to wrap up with that on the other side of this break. Penn State baseball went on an incredible run to finish the season, but they come up 1 run short in the 9th inning of the Big Ten championship game, where if you win the conference tournament, you would have made it to Omaha, Nebraska. They ended up losing to the Nebraska Cornhuskers out in Omaha 2-1. The bats went cold. I mean, they did an incredible job of holding a very good Nebraska team quietly offensively that entire game, but some mistakes were made, late hitting by the Cornhuskers, but Penn State really had, an incredible season under Mike Gambino in year 1. Of course, they're going to make some changes, so that's going to be something we can have a conversation about later on. But Adam, the bigger point is that the Big Ten tournament does double elimination all the way through. Nebraska loses early in the tournament, battles its way back into the championship, and then Penn State gets penalized for that because they went undefeated all the way through. If it's going to be double elimination, make it double elimination. That's how my Little League tournaments were, Adam. When our team ended up winning the championship. We were 12 years old, and we lost the first game, but we were undefeated all the way through. We lost the first part of the championship game. Then the team had to beat us twice, and then we absolutely waxed them in the second game, and we ended up winning. But that's how you're supposed to do it. Oh, but the TV networks don't like that. It's not a true championship, but it hurts the sport, and people will still show up to watch that first part of the championship game and the second part if it needs to be played.
Yeah, I think it's weird because the Big Ten tournament's one of the weird ones where it's not an 8-team tournament. It's 2 separate 4-team tournaments, and Penn State would have got to play Michigan twice. That's where the whole thing goes there. That's double elimination. Then the winner of each double elimination bracket then plays in a 1-game situation. Hopefully, the Big Ten perfect world works out where either Indiana would have beat Nebraska, would have been 2 undefeated teams, and we wouldn't have had to worry about it. Or, right. Penn State loses that first game to Michigan, then everyone has 1 loss in the conference championship, and you don't have to worry about it. But just worked out not in a way. Penn State obviously wins all their games. They don't get the chance, to have that safety net. I think the one thing they had is they were playing less games than Nebraska, so you had that because Nebraska obviously had to play their way back. Mm-hmm. They played Indiana twice. Penn State only played 3 games. Nebraska had played 5 going into it, so Penn State's arms probably were more there, and it showed. But I mean, Nebraska's starter just went nuts, went 8 innings. Then you turn it over to the Big Ten pitcher of the year in the 9th to close things out, allowed Nebraska to get the win. But definitely, frustrating if you're Penn State. I know a lot of fans were confused, was explaining that to a lot of people during the week on how the double elimination works. They're like, well, so we'll play Michigan twice if they beat us, but we won't play. It's a 1 game on Sunday. I mean, I understand why they do it, but at the same time, obviously it hurts Penn State, who was 3-0, hadn't lost, and the tournament with the same amount of losses as Nebraska, but Nebraska is going to the NCAA tournament and Penn State season's over.
Yeah, and there was obviously no opportunity for an at-large bid. I mean, Penn State went on the hot streak, but the way they were robbed. They were robbed at the end of the day because they got credit for doing all of the work until the final game when it mattered most. That should have been game 1 and then game 2 if necessary. I don't know why a city league when I'm a teenager can get it right, but the Big Ten conference cannot.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the one thing you do it is you get rid of the 4-team thing and you kind of make it an
Mhm.
8-team tournament and then have the double elimination through, and everyone's in the same bracket, so it's easy to
Yeah.
kind of work through that double elimination. How they do the 4 separate brackets, I mean, it's really weird how they set that up. I mean, I was a little confused going into it because I'm like, so Penn State's going to play obviously Michigan after they beat Illinois. They beat Illinois, so I'm like, oh, so they'll play Indiana, who won the top half of the bracket. No, they're going to play the team out of the losers bracket. So I mean, it was really hard kind of trying to keep track of everyone of who Penn State was going to play and how the bracket's set up. It's really confusing when you look at it and try to follow it. But of course, Penn State unable to get it done. And I mean, they had a great run. Mike Gambino in year one, a great run through it. I mean, even in that game, it's 1-1 in the top of the ninth with 2 outs and a borderline pitch right on the outside of the plate. Could have went either way as well. Doesn't go Jaden Henline's way. And on a full count, you had an RBI double that turned out to be the game winner for Nebraska. So it was definitely a tough game for the Nittany Lions. But as I said, great run. I mean, most wins in a first-year head coach since 2005 for Penn State, and obviously a lot of high upside for Penn State in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And you listen to Mike Gambino's thoughts on where this program is trending. And I mean, the words speak for itself. I highly encourage people to go see what Coach had to say. Adam, you were around this team. You covered them for Penn State CommRadio. You called games alongside Brian Tripp, who is the main play-by-play voice for the team. And CommRadio does an incredible job of covering select games as well when Brian is not available. So you saw this team in action time and time again. What was it about Gambino? What was it about this squad that made them so competitive? And who knows what that hypothetical game 2 championship would have held, but what made them such an effective team when it came to the postseason?
I mean, I think, the one thing I traveled with the team back in March, and their growth throughout the season was huge for this Penn State team. One thing they always had, I thought they had one of the best lineups in the Big Ten when it comes to hitting. I thought they had a great lineup. JT Morrow was one of the best hitters in the Big Ten, was second in the conference in average behind Josh Grauer from Rutgers, who was player of the year. They have Adam Cecere, who's just such a good hitter from Wake Forest, a lot of experience. I mean, everyone really got to know him out in Omaha with all the big hits he had, including the 2-run home run in the 10th that helped Penn State beat Michigan in the semifinals. Matt Maloney's a great hitter, was playing DH and catcher for Penn State. Bryce Molinaro is a sophomore. Us on the crew that covered with Brian Tripp during out the year, we were trying to figure out how he didn't play at St. John's last year. And he transferred to Penn State. He's one of the best hitters Penn State had a huge grand slam, had an 18-game hitting streak to finish out the year that he'll be carrying into next season. So, I mean, he's great. He's a real staple for them because he'll be back. He's one of the guys coming back. He'll be over at third base on that corner. Grant Norris had a great year at the plate as well. So their bats were just so good. And Bobby Marsh as well out in left field. The Bellefonte native is a really, really good hitter as well. So I think that's what really carried them. And the pitching and the defense was really a problem early in the year. They kind of struggled. They had the lowest ERA in the Big Ten throughout the year, had some errors in the field. But you saw once they got to Omaha, they really cleaned it up. And especially that Rutgers series, I think, is where it started to turn around. Travis Linsman had a great start against Rutgers, as well as before that against Georgetown the week before in the non-conference series. Jaden Henline went 7 really good innings against Rutgers. And I think that really got them going to Maryland. They were both lights out in that sweep for the Penn State Nittany Lions against them to help clinch their spot in Omaha. And then everyone saw them once they got out to Omaha. Those two were just unbelievable on the mound for Penn State, shutting down Illinois, shutting down Michigan, and then coming in and were really, really good in the championship game, held Nebraska, who's a great offense, to 2 runs. So I think that's what this team had, and what made them so great was the bats got it. And as the season went on, the pitching got better, and the defense really cleaned a lot of things up that made them very dangerous. And I think showed a lot of people that, recruits in the Pennsylvania area, as well as people entering the transporter, that you can go to Penn State and you can win. Mike Gambino's a great guy. I love the way he runs the program. Got to talk to him a lot this year, and it makes Penn State such a nice team. He calls Penn State a sleeping giant in the Big Ten with what they have the potential to do, and I think they really put that on display for everybody to see. They got a lot of national attention this week out in Omaha for the run they made. So, I mean, all good things coming out of Penn State's program, and a bright future for Mike Gambino after year one.
Penn State baseball school? It absolutely can be. And I think with the amount of time that I've spent covering high school baseball in Pennsylvania, if you can convince a lot of those in-state kids, those players, to stay home, you have an excellent run. And Mike Gambino is the guy to do just that. The guy who's always helped me out with men's basketball. He can talk football and baseball, as you've seen here. He's sports media companies. He is a free agent now. That is Adam Sheetz over on the other side. Adam, thanks so much for the time. The tape's all there. He showcased his skills when it comes to these kinds of conversations. So, Adam, I appreciate the time. Hopefully you don't go too far away when you are ultimately picked up by somebody, but I'm always, happy to have you back on. You're always welcome on the show anytime we can chat some Penn State athletics.
Thanks, Zach. Always a pleasure.
And once again, thanks for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a like on the episode, share it with friends and family. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments section below. If Penn State men's basketball is a top 25 team, if they're making the NCAA tournament. And if you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your Penn State Nittany Lions. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the free Fire TV channels app.